In this country right now, we don't have a hiring issue. We have a retention issue. Yes, we can solve some of the retention issue through better hiring, but we've got to make sure we've got our systems and our processes in place so that when someone comes in, they get that exact same amazing wow experience where they call their friends and they go, oh my gosh, you got to come work here.
Hello and welcome to the Care to Lead podcast. I'm so excited to have today Ryan Englin. Ryan is the founder and CEO of Core Matters and host of the Titans of the Trade podcast. He is also the best-selling author of Hire Better People Faster, which sounds like a must-read for almost everybody right now. Over the past 20 years, he's helped hundreds of businesses hire thousands of great employees by revolutionizing the way America's service industries attract, hire, and retain talent. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here, Ryan.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I love this topic and I love sharing it with people.
So, first of all, can you share with me, with our listeners, what got you started in this industry? What inspired you to do this?
Well, I grew up in the blue collar space. My dad was an owner operator. And like most owner operators, they have this dream of being self-employed and making more money and having time freedom. And I remember when I was in elementary school, I would go down to the shop with my dad after school. And I would go down there on the weekends. And he would be on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And I was like, why would anybody want this? Why would anybody want this? And as I got older, I realized that his problem wasn't that he was just a slave to the business and that was normal. It was that no one ever taught him how to recruit and retain good people he could trust. So when I got out of college, I did like any good son and I said, I'm not going into the family business. And I went and started my own company. And it was a marketing company because I thought at the time that the reason people like my dad struggled was because they didn't have enough business coming in. Surely if he just had more business, he'd make the money. Surely if he just had more business, he'd be able to hire the people. And so I did marketing for a while with a lot of contractors, a lot of people in the trades. And it was about 4 years in, and I had a whole bunch of clients tell me, leads aren't my problem. Customers aren't my problem. I can't find people to do the work. And so I said, well, let's give that a shot. I mean, recruiting is a marketing problem after all. If you're not recruiting well, you have a marketing issue. And I was a marketing company, so I thought I can solve this problem. A couple weeks later, one client called me. They're like, we just placed 4 guys in trucks. We got 2 more trucks on order. We're ready to go. Like, turn leads back on. And I realized in that moment that I was onto something and something that the rest of the, other people in the industry could use, including people like my dad. Unfortunately for him, it was too late. He was ready to retire by then. But I just know so many other entrepreneurs that have that same dream and vision that my dad did. And they never achieve it because they never can find and retain the people they can trust.
So what industries do you recruit for specifically? Or any industries, food service? Like what are the industries?
Yeah. So a lot of our background is in field services. So think home service contractors, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, business services, IT, cleaning companies, and those kinds of things. And then we have a lot background in construction as well. Anybody that's hiring a lot of frontline employees.
So you don't do things like in the medical field, like I'm married to a physician who has a practice, he has like 35 employees. And the thing is this constant, even physicians, it's hard to find, but beyond that, just those front desk people, techs. And I mean, it's just really hard to find people in that industry. And I have clients in other industries that are struggling with the same thing. Now, when you're getting really senior, like physicians, there's a lot of places out there that have recruiting firms for that. And your higher level professionals, the tech and so on. But those frontline, as you said, they're the challenge.
Yeah, so we've done some work in the medical space. It's not a huge area of practice for us, although I would love to increase that. But think of the nursing assistants and the people at the front desk and maybe people in accounting. Those are roles that we would do that we would help them with. Anything that's high volume is what I like to say. So if you've got a position that you need to add more people as your company grows, there's a lot of those service positions, or if it's a high turnover position, like customer service is a very high turnover position because nobody calls a customer service rep when they're having a great day. There's only so much of that you can take before it's like, I'm going to go find something else. There's just high turnover. But really, I like to say hourly jobs, the hourly jobs, the ones that a lot of times companies, I'm going to say the word dismiss, like they dismiss them. They're like, they're not as important. I'm not going to invest in those people as much because they're just going to leave me in 3 months anyways. Like they have this mindset about these positions that with just some simple shifts, they can really transform their ability to recruit.
So let's then talk about like, how is it cost effective? Now, I know like when we go to hire a senior person, you're looking at 35% of their salary as a fee. When you're hiring an hourly person, even 35% of their salary is not going to pay your bills as a recruiter. So how does all that work? How does that become cost effective for the client and functional for you?
So we are not recruiters and we are not a staffing agency. We are a coaching and training company.
I love that.
So I like to say we teach people how to fish. And just like when you're learning to fish, it's about the right tools and it's about the right location. It's about the right bait. All of that carries over here. Do you have the right tools in place to help you recruit and compete with the big companies that have the multi-million-dollar monthly budgets for recruiting? Do you have the right processes in place so that when someone does come in for an interview, you can create an amazing experience for them where they walk away going, I really hope they call me and offer me the job? Do you have the right follow-up and follow-through in place so that you make sure you follow through on all your commitments? I believe that the number one reason people don't work out long-term in a new job is because on either side, expectations weren't met. And if you can create a process where you can set those expectations and then as the employer follow through on them and meet them, you're going to solve most of your recruiting problems. Because in this country right now, we don't have a hiring issue. We have a retention issue. And yes, we can solve some of the retention issue through better hiring, but we've got to make sure we've got our systems and our processes in place so that when someone comes in, they get that exact same amazing wow experience where they call their friends and they go, oh my gosh, you got to come work here. And I think that companies have put an emphasis, like you said, on those higher positions. They'll do that. They'll wine and dine. They'll spend time with assessments. They'll take spouses out to dinner and all of that. But then they look at your $15 an hour customer service rep and they're like, they're just going to leave me in 3 months anyway. So why bother?
Yeah, that is a mindset. Yeah, right.
And is it like, well, is it chicken or the egg? Do they leave you because you don't do that? Right. And so it's really understanding that you can create a system, you can put a process in place that allows you to work with these hourly employees, those ones that we often think are lesser than, so we're not going to put effort into them, and deliver a wow experience that they just can't wait to tell their friends about.
So do you, in your coaching and training, do you include like how to conduct an interview effectively? And tell me a little bit more. That's one of the things that I'm kind of passionate about as well. So I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah. So when we built this process, the first thing we did was figure out how to get applicants in, because if we don't have applicants, we have no one to interview. But then what I realized was most people are conducting the interview wrong. And
100%.
It is the component of the model. So we have a model. There's 7 components to it, but interview is the one I am absolutely the most passionate about. It's my favorite part of it. I love the interview process. And I think what's happened is over time, we've forgotten that this is a relationship. This is an employee-employer relationship. And just like any relationship, the foundation of good relationship is communication. And not just one-way communication, two-way communication. So what we do is we sit down and we show everybody, this is how you build a successful interview process. And then this is what the conversation should look like, not questions. We provide questions just to keep the conversation on track, but it really is a conversation. And when you sit down, you have a conversation, human being to human being, not employer to employee, not I am bigger and better and stronger than you are, right? We have a conversation, human to human conversation. It just changes the whole dynamic, whole dynamic. We've got stories of companies that were ready to hire somebody. They were so enamored with this person. They're like, they are perfect. And then they follow our process for expectation setting right during the offer meeting. And we've literally had candidates say, you know what? I can't do this to you. I was just going to take this as a stopgap until I found something else. And I see how important your team is to you and how important your customers are to you. And I can't do that. So I'm going to bow out of this process, because they sit there and they have a real conversation.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because in a more executive level, though, I coach on both sides of the equation, right? So I go into organizations and I will either be a part of the interview team or I will coach their interview team, or sometimes both, to do the interviews. And then I also am called quite frequently by executives to coach them on preparing for interviews. And I think one of the biggest I don't want to call it an obstacle. One of the biggest things that I find is when people go into an interview as a candidate, they think that interview is about them. And it is 100% not about them. It is about the person interviewing you. It is about the company that you're sitting in front of. And what we don't understand is, in an interview, we want to talk. We want to showcase our skills. We want to tell them why we're the best fit. And really what we need to do is really listen. We need to hear what problem they have that they're trying to solve, and then formulate our answers in a way that says how we're the one to solve it. And it is, you're right, it's more of a conversation. It's listening as well as just, and I've been doing this for 5 years and I have this experience and you have to hire me. And it's a game changer.
It's funny that you say that, because we teach employers the exact same thing. This is not about you. This is about the candidate. You need to talk about how you're going to be able to help them achieve their goals, and how that this step, this decision they make that could upend their entire life, their livelihood, is the right decision. Candidates are taking a huge risk, especially if they are currently employed. To go from one company to another, they have no idea if you're going to be as psycho as their current boss or not. Right? They're taking this huge risk. So authenticity is so important from the employer. This is not a wine and dine type situation. But we do remind them, just to your point, that in that situation, the employer, the person interviewing it, the interviewer, is the one that's buying in that situation. So that candidate needs to sell themselves. But what we see too often is employers are desperate and they're like, here's all the reasons you need to come work here. And they spend 30 minutes selling themselves. And then the candidate's like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. And they're like, cool, you're hired. And then 6 weeks later, they're like, what the heck? Who is this?
Yeah.
Because they forgot to have the conversation. They were so focused on them the whole time that they didn't remember to have a conversation.
Right. And then you get in an interview, they're usually maybe 45 minutes, especially in the level that you're talking, 30 to 45 minutes. That's a small window of time to really find out if that candidate's the right candidate, and on the flip side, if this organization is the right organization. So if that isn't flowing almost like a dance, you're going to miss opportunities. And when you leave an interview, the last thing they're going to remember about you, like what is it that's going to stick in their head on both sides? What's going to stick in that prospective employee's mind when they leave the interview? And what's going to stick in the employer's mind about you? And that's really key to think about before you even start the interview.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that if people would just put a little bit more effort at the beginning, kind of like going on a first date, right? I talk about that all the time. For a first date, someone we have no idea if we're going to spend the rest of our lives with, we go get haircuts, we go get shaved, we go buy new clothes, we get our hair done. Like, we do all of these things to impress them. We do all this preparation to prepare for a first date. But what happens with most interviews, especially at the level we're talking about? Candidate rolls out of bed, maybe throws some gel in their hair, puts on yesterday's clothes, and just stumbles in there and we're like, can I have a job? And the first question the employer asks is, what can you tell us about the company? I don't know, I applied. And all of a sudden, it's like, that's how it starts. And nobody puts any effort in. So one of the things we teach our clients how to do is, how do you coach the candidate through the interview? Which is amazing to opening up everyone's eyes to whether or not it's a good fit. Because These candidates are stressed out. There's a lot of uncertainty in their life right now. And the last thing they are able to do is be themselves because they just want to impress you so desperately.
I just want to hear your it sounds awesome that you have 7 steps and here's 7 parts of your system. And I got you off on this interview tangent. Tell me more about the other parts of the system.
Like I said, the interview is the one I'm most passionate about. So I could talk about that one forever. But
me too. That's why I said we're going to go down this rabbit
there are
hole.
7 components inside of the core fit hiring system. And you'll hear me talk a lot about core fit because I believe that the core of your organization are made up of 3 things: the way you behave, why you do what you do, that why, and where you're going as a company. You've heard about the metaphorical bus, like get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Well, if you have no idea where that bus is going, or you're like most small businesses and your bus is just going in circles, people are going to get off and they're going to get on a different bus. And so you've got to be really clear that the people that are on the bus are the right people on the bus. So that's the core of your organization. A lot of people call that culture. We call it your core. And it's the way you behave, why you do what you do, and where you're going. And when you can attract people to your core, everything else inside the system just works more effectively. So once we're clear on your core, we then have to figure out how to tell the story. And this is where I think a lot of companies miss. They're so focused on telling the story to their customers, they forget to tell the story to their employees. And so what happens is they put all this emphasis and effort into customer experience. You've probably heard that term before.
Right.
But who delivers the customer experience in a service organization? Your employees do. So if you can create an amazing employee experience and put your energy and efforts there, they're going to take care of your customers. You're not going to have to worry about that. So that's core. And then we look at find. And the find component is all about where you should be fishing, not who you need to, not go into Indeed. I can't find anybody. I keep looking for these individuals. Well, a lot of times you just need a different fishing hole. You just need to go somewhere else. And so identifying who your core fit is, we call it the core fit profile. Putting together a core fit profile, identifying who the right person is for your organization, and then saying to yourself, now where do they spend their time? Because it's not on Indeed. It's almost never on Indeed. Now you need to be on the job boards. That's a whole nother conversation. But most employers want to hire people that are gainfully employed. Well, the gainfully employed aren't on job boards. So you've got to go get in front of them somewhere else. So that's fine. That's a marketing component. Then we look at automate, because most companies, an application will come in and it'll sit in inbox for 3 or 4 days. And then they'll call the candidate and get a voicemail. And then they'll text them and they'll never hear back. And then a week later, they'll call them again and they're like, see, look, no one wants to work anymore. No, that person that applied 4 days ago needed a job. Somebody else called them faster than you did. They took a job somewhere else. That's why they're ignoring you. And so automation is about how do we really streamline this process so that when a new application comes in, they get a response from you and your team within 15 minutes. That's how you stay ahead of that. And then inside of automation, we talk about employee referral programs. We talk about building a bench or a pipeline of people that you could hire from later. Basically, stock your own pond is the idea there, so that you can go fishing there instead of having to go to the job boards or spend money or any of that. And then once that's done, we go to interview. And the interview component we talked a little bit about, and that's just the pre-hire side. So that's before they're an employee. And then the other half of our model, the last 3 components, is all about how do you retain them? How do you keep them? And it all starts with an amazing onboarding process.
I was going to ask you, so you guys cover onboarding as well, because it is so critical in so many organizations, especially when it's a customer, facing. Just get in here. If you have a pulse, the bathroom's over there, get started. That's onboarding in a lot of these places.
It really is. And I ask people all the time when onboarding starts. And so many companies say, oh, well, the day they show up. Onboarding starts when they apply. And if you think about that, think about, and I use a lot of relationship analogies, but how often, I've been married almost 20 years now, and we still both remember our first date. That's the application in this. Our first date set the tone for our relationship for the next 30 years. That application and the way you responded to that application sets the tone for how effective they're going to be as an employee, how engaged they're going to be, how easy it's going to be to onboard them. So you have to think about your onboarding process starts when they apply and what's that interaction like. And then when we're done with that, we look at engagement. How do you keep people engaged long-term? Because engaged employees are productive and productive employees are profitable. So that's where we get the ROI, is in being able to retain them.
Yeah, that's key. So I'm curious then, because I've like I said, my family owned a business, so I've kind of grown up in this kind of world too. And I know that the business owners, sometimes just get into a mindset where it's just, I don't care anymore. They're going to quit. So just, I just don't care anymore. Like, how do you go about re-educating business owners that, like, you can change this? Yeah. Like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, you do have control. Well, like I said, I go with a lot of relationship analogies because those usually stick, because people know what that's like. I mean, how would a relationship go if I woke up every morning and said, my wife's just going to leave me anyways?
Probably, yeah.
Like, what's going to happen? I'm going to end up pushing her away, or I am going to end up just not taking care of her needs. And she's going to be like, see, he doesn't love me anymore anyways. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
We do that to employees all the time. And then we wonder why they leave and no one wants to work. And it's something that's so easy to change, but you just have to care a little bit. And we talk to a lot of our clients about how the owner of the company, or even the hiring manager, supervisors, should spend about a third of their time working on their people. Because that's the whole point of building a team, is to leverage someone else's time for increased productivity. Well, if you're investing in your people, you're training them, you're coaching them, you're keeping them engaged, they're excited to come to work, they're going to be more productive. Mm-hmm. And when they're more productive, you're going to win, everybody wins. Customer wins when they're more productive. But it's a mindset shift. And I tell people about 70% of the work we do over here at Core Matters is mindset. 30% is the how-to. The how-to is easy when the why is big enough. When you are so focused on why you need to build a team, and it's so important to you, and you're committed to doing whatever it takes, making it happen is easy.
So I love this. And tell me about this book that you have out now. I want to hear all about it and what inspired you to write it and who the audience is for this book.
Yeah, so the name of the book is Hire Better People Faster. And it is a deep dive into our proven process. All 7 components, 14 plus tools. Each component has 2 primary tools. And then there's some secondary tools in each component. And it's just a deep dive. It's a how-to manual for being able to attract, hire, and retain pretty much anybody in an organization. And it's built around this idea that the world has changed. The way you look for work is different. When I graduated college 20 plus years ago, I put on a suit, I went and knocked on doors, and I handed out nice resumes. That's how I did it 20 years ago. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these job boards. We didn't have all of this stuff. The world has changed, and a lot of employers haven't kept up. And so it really is a how-to manual. So you can go through it. You can check off the boxes and start implementing things. Like, I didn't hold anything back in this book. And I wrote it because there are so many people out there, big companies, small companies, everything in between, that just have never kept up with how to build an effective process for this. And I wanted to put it in the hands of as many people as possible. And I knew that the only way to do that was to write a book. And so the target for the book is the owner, is the CEO, is the president, is the VP or director of a department. The book is not written for your HR team. It is not an HR book. It is a marketing book, because I believe that recruiting is a marketing activity. And just like you market for customers and then turn them over to your sales team and then turn them over to fulfillment and then deliver an amazing experience and keep them engaged and coming back, we do the same thing here. Recruiting is that marketing activity. That thing you post online is an advertisement that brings them into an interview, which is equivalent to the sales process, which then turns them over to fulfillment, which is your hiring manager and how they interact with your team. And then by keeping them engaged is what keeps them coming back to work day after day for years.
I am definitely going to be ordering a copy of your book, because the business manager, the office manager of my husband's business, does she runs the show pretty much, because he's a doctor, doesn't want to deal with it. This would be a great read for her.
Well, I have an offer for your listeners.
Okay.
They can get a free copy of my book if they want to go to my website. Go to corematters.com/free book, put in your email. I do charge a small shipping and handling fee, and then we'll mail you out a copy.
Awesome. I will definitely make sure that people get that link because there are so many of our listeners that are leaders and they're all different size businesses. So I just had a podcast yesterday with a young woman who owns several locations where they do facials. So they're hiring estheticians. Can't even talk today. And they're hiring hourly people, and all this is so relevant to so many organizations. And even though your business right now maybe focuses on specific areas, and which I'm sure you're willing to go outside of, but I think your book is going to touch every industry and anyone who's hiring like that. And off the top of my head, I'm thinking like 10 people who could really benefit from your book.
Yeah. We do a lot of work in the blue collar space and in the trades, but we've worked in healthcare. We've worked in insurance, we've worked in retail, we've worked in hospitality. So the principles in this book apply to all of those industries.
Right. I'm sure what you do is applicable across industries. What's the most common misconception about your industry, about hiring people? What's the most common misconception that you'd like to debunk?
That there's a labor shortage in any industry. There's no labor shortage. We don't have a hiring problem in this country. We have a retention problem in this country. And for those of you listening, if you don't believe me, go ask your office manager, your HR department, how many people were employed on 12/31 and how many W-2s did we issue last year?
Mm-hmm.
And the number might make you sick when you see how many people you turned through last year. We get companies calling us all the time to say, I just need 20 people. If I just had 20 more people, I'd be set. And then I find out that they went through 70 or 80 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you could have just kept 25% of them, you wouldn't be calling me. And a lot of that problem is we're not hiring the right people, right? We're doing a 30-minute interview and they fogged a mirror and so they're hired. That's a big problem.
They have a post, they get in.
Well, the bar is low now. You just have to show up for the interview. You can even be late.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies will hire you.
So I was actually surprised when I met my husband and I started noticing, I would help him do some interviews in the very beginning of our relationships and people just didn't show up.
Yeah.
I mean, they just didn't. And coming from a more corporate environment where it's a much more at stake, I guess, for that position, they showed up. I was not prepared for either that or they would even accept the job and not show up on day one. So apparently his business could use your book.
Very common in the industries we serve. So it sounds like there's not too much difference there. We had a client one time that had almost a 90% no-show rate. They had a recruiter booking the interviews with the hiring managers, and 9 out of 10 times people would no-show. And they just happened to be recording their calls. It was just part of their process for customer service. And so we pulled some of the calls and we listened to what was happening in those phone calls where they were setting up the interview. And they made one tweak. And within a month, it had almost completely flipped. 9 out of 10 people were showing up. And
are you willing to share the tweak?
Looking for work is one of life's most stressful events. Anybody that's looked for work and can remember looking for work, it's stressful. The employer's got a game they're playing. The candidate is playing a different game with a different set of rules, but they're both playing games. Your existing employer's got the game they're playing, like, oh my gosh, they better not find out I'm looking. That could be bad for me. We have all these rules that we've created and how we do this. So looking for work is incredibly stressful. And when we understand that as employers, and when we meet these people where they're at and we say, hey, you know what? I know this is stressful. I know that you've got a lot riding on this here, and this has to work for you. And we just go in with empathy and we just say, let's meet them where they're at. Let's have the conversation they want to have. And so one example I like to give is they had a lot of overtime. This client had worked a lot of overtime, and they had, I remember one call in particular where the recruiter was saying, hey, we do a lot of overtime. Is that okay? And this one gentleman said, hey, I can do overtime on any day but Friday. And she's like, okay, good. We don't do overtime on Friday. It's perfect. And she moved on. Later on in the call, he mentioned it again. He goes, on Friday night, I play with my band. She's like, oh, that's great. And she moved on. A couple minutes later, he mentioned the band again. I just said, hey, maybe he just wants to talk about that band. Maybe he just wants to connect with you on something that's important to him. And so our coaching was connect with people on what they want to talk about, especially when you're screening them in the beginning, just to find out if they're the right person for you. And so she started listening for the things that were the answers that were being given to questions she hadn't asked yet. And she goes, oh, and then later, maybe a conversation about a pet or a vacation they took or something that they just wanted to talk about. And then she would talk about that with them. Now, all of a sudden, there was a connection. And that candidate had something to lose if they didn't show up for the interview.
That's very powerful. And I think a lot of people can learn from that, because we do get into a zone when we're interviewing, and it's just like, I got to check off all these things on my checklist. Do they live within a reasonable commute? Do they have some relevant experience? Have they job hopped more than like 20 times in the last 2 years? Check, check, check. All right, can I see their breath on the mirror that I hold in front of them? Yes, they're alive. They could show up tomorrow. They're hired. And you're right, that does not encourage someone to become and stay a part of an organization. Is it, in your experience, most of the people who they're hiring, do they want to be in these roles long term, or are there a lot? I think there's a mix. My perspective is probably a mix between like high school kids getting ready to go to college, so they're going to be there temporary. But a lot of the time, that's not the case. They're adults who are going to be here and want to stay.
There's two types of employees out there, in my opinion. There's rock stars and superstars. I talk about this a lot. Your rock stars, they are the foundation of your organization. And the thing about rock stars is they don't want to move up. They want to be exceptional at what they do. They want to be top 10% in that role. They don't want promotions. They don't want extra responsibilities. What they want you to do is train them to be better at what they're currently doing. And they want to go home at the end of the day and disconnect from work and come in tomorrow and crush it tomorrow, but then disconnect and go home from work. That's rock stars. Most of the time, companies need more rock stars. But what happens is superstars interview amazingly well, because they do it a lot. Because superstars are going to move up or they move on. And if you don't promote them, they're going to go somewhere else, and they just want to climb the corporate ladder. They just want to move up. They want the responsibilities. They want to manage the team. They want to do that. And what happens is we as employers look at superstars, and they're amazing during the interview. They're like, where has this person been my whole life? And then they show up and they want to change everything, and drives us nuts. And we're like, could they just focus? They're so unfocused. But then what happens is we interview these rock stars, someone who's been at the same, like, it's funny. We don't want the person that's had 20 jobs in 2 years, but that person interviews really well. So we hire them, give them a shot because they're interviewing all the time. What we want to hire is the person that's been at the last job for 8 years. Well, that person's going to suck it in the interview because they don't do it. Their resume is going to not be perfect. It's not going to be updated because they don't look for jobs that often. And so during the interview, we discount them and say, well, their resume is not that great. They didn't interview very well. They look nervous all the time. I can't hire someone like that. But that's the person we needed to hire. And so to answer your question, I believe there are some people that want to move up, but I think the majority of people just want to be amazing at what they do.
I like that. So my question for you is, when you're looking at a resume and you don't want that person who is job hopped, a whole bunch in a couple of year period, but at the same time, do you find that there's a risk in hiring someone who's been at the same place for 25 years and now all of a sudden they have to look for something new? What is I have an opinion on that, but I'm curious about your thoughts.
The reality is we all have biases. We all have our biases, right? Like, I can think of a dozen reasons why hiring that person with 25 years experience is the right way to go. And I can think of a dozen reasons why it's not.
Why it's not, right?
But here's how I look at it. The reason why someone is switching jobs is more important than how long they've been there or how many jobs they've had. I look at it this way, the job hoppers, because that one comes up all the time. There's two types of job hoppers. There's those that switch jobs every few months, but they stay within the same industry. They stay within the same role. They're doing the same work. They're just bouncing around jobs. That's one. Then there's the other type of job hopper that one day they're a cashier, the next day they're in construction, then they did a stint in manufacturing, and then they went to medical, and you're just like, whoa. Two types of job hoppers. The first one hasn't found the right place where they feel like they belong. And they are looking for that employer that they get excited about going to on Monday morning, not dreading it Sunday night. That person, they're staying in the same industry, they're staying in the same roles, they're looking for the right team to be a part of. The other one, they just don't know what they want to do when they grow up. And so that one you just steer clear of. So that's my take. Those ones that job hop and switch industries or switch lots of roles, they're in sales one day and then they're in manufacturing the next. Like, stay away from those people. Let them figure out what they want to do with their lives and then hire them. But the majority of the time, the job hoppers we see are the ones that, I'm an electrician, I've been an electrician, I want to be an electrician. I've been customer service, I want to do customer service, I'm staying customer service. And they just switch employers because they're looking for the right team.
I like that. Well, I've found that, like, say you've been an electrician for 20 years for the same person, and then that person decides, I'm closing my business. You're not prepared to take it over. So now after 25 years, you're out looking for another job. So yes, there's a gazillion reasons why that's a great employee to hire, because they've got this experience, they've got the skills, they've probably had a lot of problems. And then on the flip side, there's for the first 6 months of that person's role in your position, they could be going, but my own employer, this is how we did it. But this is how we did it before.
Yeah. Old dog,
and
new
that's
trick.
hard to break. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a hard thing to break. So you're right. You've really got to balance these things. And I think your leadership, and that's another thing, right, too, because a lot of times when you're hiring this level of employee, the level of management, their first line supervisors aren't that much more experienced than the person they're hiring. They're just maybe been with the company a little bit longer. So that level of coaching and training is important as well, so that they know how to react and respond when people say, but that's how we did it in my old job. And why do you do it this way? Instead of just shut up and I don't care what we did in your old job, or, I don't pay you to think, and all these other things I've heard in my career through the years. You've got to train them too. And it sounds like with what you do, that's part of it.
Well, it goes back to that onboarding piece. Right? We talked about that. I have this little cartoon I've put together, and onboarding so often looks like the employee shows up for work. There's no one there to greet them. There's no signage. There's nothing. They're ringing the bell at the front desk going, is anybody here? And they're like, I'm here for my first day of work. And the person at the desk is like, who are you? They didn't tell me we had someone new starting today. And so your hiring manager comes out, or HR comes out and says, oh, we're so glad you're here, but IT's not done with your logins. We didn't finish your paperwork or background check. You really can't do anything. So you know what? There's Susie over there. Can you just go shadow Susie for the day? And that employee goes home at the end of the day going, what the heck? I thought they said they were excited to have me here. That wasn't excitement. I don't know what that was, but that was not what I thought I was getting into. And then you go back day 2 and they're like, by the way, we just got your login set up. I know you're going to log in there. The emails are going to be a little intimidating because there's like 6 weeks worth. Remember, I told you Jimmy quit and we didn't have anyone to fill the position. So we just started forwarding all those emails to the new person because we knew you'd show up and you'd do great. Oh, and there's your desk over there, those boxes. Don't worry about them. You'll get through them. But that's all the the past due work that we've got. And then as you send them back to the desk, you're like, by the way, be careful. Don't get hurt. You don't have insurance yet. And it's just like this idea, like that's how we onboard people. Whereas imagine we sat down and we said, hey, you know what? I'm going to spend a week with you just to understand where you're at, how you do processes. How'd you do it at your old place? Why did you do it that way? Do you think that was the right way to do it? Let me show you the way we do it and why we do it this way. You might learn so much. You take that 25-year-old veteran, he's like, well, my boss used to do this way. And you're like, that's better than the way we do it. Like, you never know what you're going to get from that person. But it's sitting down and having a conversation, which we so forget to do. I heard this quote not too long ago, and I love it. Someone on my podcast said it. It's like, why is it as leaders, we never have time to do it right, but we always have time to do it over?
I like that.
And it's so profound. And I mean, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it because it's so true. We never take the time to do it right the first time. But you know what? When that person doesn't work out, we'll just start over again. Yeah. What's that cost you? Oh,
absolutely.
To think.
This has been a really engaging and insightful conversation. So for our listeners who want to learn more about your work, how can they connect with you and your business?
Well, I'm all over LinkedIn. So if they want to look me up there, just look for Ryan Englin or Core Matters. But corematters.com is going to be the best place to learn about us. And like I said, for the listeners that are interested in a free copy of my book, corematters.com/free book.
We will definitely put that in the show notes with your podcast. I thank you so much for being here. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Care to Lead podcast today. If you found this episode valuable and want to stay updated on our latest interviews and insights, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, until next time, leaders who care, care to lead. Thank you, Ryan, for being here.
Thank you.